3. Quarry. There was a quarry down old Route 29 where Kurt and I would go to drink beers and talk. I loved that quarry. It was immense and beautiful. The far wall was so huge and far away it was usually obscured by haze. It was probably dust now that I think about it. The place reminded me a lot of the Grand Canyon. It was crazy to look at those walls and think about how much dirt they used to be buried under, and how many millions of years it took for it all to form. It was a good place to sit back and think. Nice and peaceful in the evenings when all the trucks and machinery had been shut off for the night. It was our escape. After a tough day at school, we'd go there. Kurt didn't have a lot of friends. I was respected at school because I smoked and got in trouble a lot, but that didn't make you friends. Kurt was respected too, but that was because he was so fucking big. He was just a big kid. He could bench 300 in his sophomore year. He was the only sophomore in the 300 club. So he was respected, and I guess the guys in the weight room were his friends, but he always had to be tough around them. But he really wasn't like that. So we were outsiders. We were each other's only good friend, but that was okay. We had the quarry. None else knew how to get in but us. Most people had seen it from the Route 29, which ran by its northern rim, but that was only a passing glance through the trees. Kurt and I figured there had to be a back entrance. So one day we spent hours driving through the woods along these back roads, which we hoped would lead us to the southern side. The work paid off. We found an old entrance that looked like it hadn't been used since the 40s. The gate was rusted and closed, but not locked. Kurt nosed it open with the car. The road was hidden under grass that grew up to the windows of the car. The wheels kept falling into tire ruts that we couldn't see, but that told us we were on the right path. We drove right up to the rim, and for the first time, we could just stand there soaking in the enormous size of the whole damn thing. That old entrance became our place. Fuck everyone else. We didn't need their parties. They would never see the quarry. When we finished our beers, we'd fling the bottles over the side. It was so quiet there we could hear the eerie whistle they made as the air rushed over their openings. Then they'd land in the lake below us. The quarry was at least 500 feet deep, maybe more at the center. But right below the southern rim, it was only about 60 feet down, and right below was a still quarry lake, the water navy blue. One day when I was watching my beer bottle spiral down and plop into the lake, I had a crazy idea. I turned around and looked past Kurt. He was against his car, tilting his head back for a drink. There was an old road behind him that ran up a slope, which was treeless because it was just bulldozed slag from the quarry. Topsoil had been thrown on top of it, and the silky green grass grew all over it. I walked past Kurt and his car. "What are you doing, Sidney?" he asked. I ignored him. I was deep in thought. I walked up the hill. It was a good 50 feet high and fairly steep. I was catching my breath at the top when Kurt came up. We could see a little farther into the quarry from where we were. I could see cars flashing for a moment as they passed by the gap in the trees on the northern rim. I started running down the hill. It gave me huge momentum. I ran towards the edge. I was flying. The grass was passing by me in tall blur. The bottom of the quarry was opening up in front of me. I stopped abruptly at the edge and looked down. There was a shore of slag about 5 feet wide between the wall and the lake. I have one eye, so depth perception is a little hard for me. It made the bottom seem close and far at once. The vertigo was exhilarating. We could clear it. "What are you doing?" Kurt asked. "Kurt, let's do something crazy." "What?" "Let's drive a car off this cliff." "What?" "Just like a movie. We'll get some beat-up jalopy, back it up that hill." I was running back towards the hill now. ride that baby down and off the edge. And we'll be inside the car as it goes over the edge and down? Yep. Are you fucking nuts? Nope. We'll get killed. No, we won't. It's not like we'll be some drunk driver going off into a river. We'll plan it. We'll be careful, methodical, like stuntmen. We'll drown, Sid. We'll have scuba tanks in the car. Kurt was quiet a minute. He looked down at the lake. It would be a frightful drop, and completely awesome. I don't know what went through his mind right then, but he looked down at the drop, back up to the hill, and then at the drop again. All right. Let's do it. It was sunny that afternoon. The sun was on my face and I felt good, like anything was possible. We each bought notebooks to write down a list of things we would need. We were going to be organized and systematic about things. First, we thought about how we would keep from drowning and wrote down scuba tanks. My brother Mitch and I were both certified divers and had our own equipment. If we would be swimming free of the car, it would probably be best not to wear shoes. So we wrote down aqua socks. Of course, we would need goggles. Goggles. We carried the notebooks with us everywhere. I'd work on mine during class. I drew a diagram that I thought was pretty close to scale. I figured the forward motion of the car would get us over the shore, but how far would we make it? And how deep was the water? That was an important question. We went to the quarry that afternoon to figure it out. It was kind of strange to be there on business. It seemed like we were violating the serenity of the quarry somehow, like conducting business in church or something. Kurt had brought a lead weight tied on some kite twine. I told him to throw it over so it landed just a few feet from the shore. The weight made a little silver splash. Then the only indication of its existence was the string that it was pulling through Kurt's fingers. The line stopped. "It's on the bottom," he said. I looked down at the string. The white line of string going down diagonally into the navy blue water made me dizzy. I think it was the angle, but it was also like a doorway into another world. "Pull it up." We pulled it up carefully. I took the point where the wet part of the twine began, and Kurt walked away towards the gate with the weight. This way we could tell how deep the water was. I watched Kurt walk to his car, then past his car, and he didn't stop anywhere near it. He was at the rusty gate when he looked back at me with the little weight in his hand. "That's deep," he yelled. I looked at the string. It was definitely wet from my fingers onward. That is deep. This was going to work. I knew it. The stunt, as we called it, was all we talked about. It was all I could think about. I didn't pay attention in class unless I thought it would help me plan for the stunt. Physics class helped with this. I was smart. I just didn't get good grades because I was a slow reader. But all my teachers admitted that I was brilliant. I would walk by the honors classes and look in on all the smart kids. I'd have liked to see some of them put their noodles to work on our little project. Of course, they wouldn't. We were doing something they would never do. They'd be sitting at their preppy little parties, getting slightly buzzed and thinking they were the new rebels without causes. They'd grow up into their lives of banal suburban subdivisions, mundane minivans and missionary positions, whereas Kurt and I would have this majestic vision of us plunging through air and into a rising blossom of parting water to look back on forever. And them? They would have nothing but a void or just boring memories of hours spent over books, calculators, or keyboards, studying for the next test, cranking out homework, or writing the next essay. We would end up ahead. We'd live life to the fullest, without regrets. It didn't take a genius to see that. Kurt came up with a few suggestions, but I was the real brains behind the operation. I realized that the impact on the water would be pretty fierce, so we would have to secure the scuba tanks so that they wouldn't hit us in the back of the head. An object in motion, you know. There would be a considerable impact, too. Helmets, I wrote down. At the same time, we would have to be able to pull the tanks out of the car. They had to be secured, but we had to be able to get them free quickly. Bungees, I wrote down. Then I realized that Kurt had never gone scuba diving before. Scuba lessons. When the weather got warmer, Kurt and I climbed the fence into the neighborhood pool. It was Friday night. We had almost gone downtown, but we decided that we had work to do. I went over the basics with Kurt, about breathing slowly and evenly. Now, you're going to be pretty excited, so just remember, deep breaths. Yeah, deep breaths, he said as he lifted the mouthpiece near his lips, bobbed his head up, then went down. He looked at me from underwater. He looked like a 200-pound peach fly with his big pink goggles. He gave me the thumbs-up sign and then surfaced. Sid, don't you think you should do this too? I can do this in my sleep, man. We decided we would have to have a protocol, a routine so we didn't panic when we went under. We sat at the top of the slag hill rehearsing what we would do. Land, unbuckle, mouthpiece, unbungee, swim. Loomis. We would launch with the windows down. That way, by the time we reached the unbungee step, we figured the car would have filled with water, equalizing the pressure so that we could open the doors and swim out. Loomis became our secret word. When we saw each other in the halls at school, we would say, "Hey, what's up, Loomis?" "Not much, Loomis." People would try to figure out what we meant. I remember this girl in the lunchroom asking us if we were in a secret society or something. "Something like that," I said. One day when I was at my locker, Kurt came up to me. "Sid, I just realized something," he said. "What's that?" "The windshield." "What about it?" "All that pressure when we dive. It may come inside and pin us." Kurt had a good point. We would have to take the windshield out. But then the water would be slapping us in the face at 50-some miles an hour. That was unacceptable. I was kind of sore at having to change something so fundamental, so late in the game. Maybe I was just angry at myself for not thinking of it. But Kurt was right. Then I realized the solution was not to take the windshield out, but to have the car land bottom first. The only way to guarantee this was by making the back as heavy as the front. We would have to put something very heavy back there. We decided that old car batteries would work. There were always a ton behind gas stations. My brother Mitch worked at the nearby Exxon, so we got 15 from him. We kept them in the woods behind my house. My parents were curious about what we were doing. I didn't tell them. They wouldn't approve or understand. But they didn't pry. They never did, as far as my life was concerned. Mitch was their favorite, even though he was the one who shot my eye out. But I digress. Anyway, Mom and Dad would say the stunt was poor judgment, plain stupid, reckless, dangerous, and all that. But they were old, as old as that rusty gate that had originally barred our way into the quarry. I would tell them someday, afterwards, when I was older, and they would be amazed. But they wouldn't understand now. We had everything set. All we needed now was the car. Between us, we scraped together $250 from odd jobs and birthday money. We looked up the cheapest used car lots in the county. We wrote down the addresses from the smallest black and white ads in the yellow pages. The first place was Henry's Used Auto. The place was just what we were looking for. Old cars, gravel lot with grass growing up through the stones. It was an overcast day. If it was a new car lot, it wouldn't seem appropriate. But since it was a used car lot, the dead sky and drops of rain on the hoods seemed to add to the car's dilapidation. It was not like we wanted to drive a brand new car into the quarry. That would be crazy. A guy in an orange raincoat and white cowboy hat came out of the office. I told Kurt to talk. He was big, so I reckon the guy would think he was older, and strangers look at me funny because of my eye patch. like they are trying to figure out if it's real or if I'm just trying to look like a badass. I busied myself looking at a station wagon with wood paneling. It had rust all around the bottom. It couldn't have gone for more than 200, I was certain. "How you all doing?" the salesman asked. "Fine," Kurt said, trying to pitch his voice low. "Are you Henry?" I pretended to be looking under the car, then I kicked the tires. "Nope, Henry is my boss. He's not here on weekdays. I'm Jeb." "Oh, well, I thought he would be, since it's his auto world and all." Kurt laughed a little. He was trying to be funny. He always came off as an idiot when he tried to be funny. "You boys interested in a car?" Yeah, we are. Something basic. Minimal. You have a certain model in mind?" Kurt turned around and looked at me. No," I said. "You both looking for a car?" "Well, we're brothers. We have a farm and we need something to carry around hay in," Kurt said. I couldn't believe Kurt was trying to lie. "Then you need a truck." We have a truck. We need something smaller that will fit into our barn," I said. The guy was staring at us. He had sized us up and knew we were wasting his time. "How much do you boys want to pay?" I figured if he thought we had money, he'd be a little more cordial. "About 500. I saw Kurt's eyes get big at my lie, but he tried not to look at me. Instead, he rubbed his hands on his thighs. "Well, why don't you come into the office and we can sit down and talk about financing? Check your credit history and I can give you an APR. Now Kurt looked right at me, his mouth open. "We were going to pay cash," I said, as cool as I could be. "I'm sorry, but we don't do cash transactions. You can come inside to talk about financing if you like, otherwise I can't help you boys." Kurt and I were both quiet for a second or two. I patted the fender of the car I was leaning on and stood up. "Well, thanks for your time then," I said, all businesslike. "Have a good day," Jeb the salesman said before he turned his back on us and walked back to his office. Kurt and I got into his parents' car, which we had borrowed for the afternoon. He started the engine and the wipers. The rain pinging on top of the car and the gravel hitting the undercarriage sounded the same as we pulled off the lot. We had planned on going to more lots that day, but we went home instead. We never talked about the stunt again. We never went back to the quarry.